Ever feel like you're on a treadmill? You're working harder, you're more productive, but you just can't seem to get ahead. Ever wonder how your parents or grandparents could buy a house, raise a family, and save for the future, often on a single income? Yet for so many of us, that feels like a fantasy. What if I told you that this struggle isn't your fault, that it wasn't an accident, or just the way things are? What if the constant financial anxiety humming in the background of our lives can be traced back to a single decision, a single lie told on a Sunday night over 50 years ago that permanently changed money itself? This isn't a conspiracy theory. This is the story of a broken promise, a temporary measure that became permanent, and how it unleashed an invisible tax on your life. This is the story of the lie that made almost everyone poorer. To get the lie, you first have to understand the world before it. Imagine a time when money was more than paper. It was a promise, backed by something real. After the devastation of World War II, world leaders gathered in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. Their goal was to build a global economic system to prevent the kind of chaos that led to the war. The system they created was revolutionary. At its heart was the US dollar. America was the only major power whose industry wasn't in ruins, so it was strong enough to anchor the world economy. A deal was struck. The US dollar would be the world's reserve currency. To make everyone trust it, America made a powerful pledge. Any country holding US dollars could exchange them for physical gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce. Think about that. The dollar wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a claim check for actual gold held in US vaults. The dollar was literally as good as gold. This was the Bretton Woods system. For about 25 years, it worked. The world saw incredible economic stability and growth. Europe and Japan rebuilt. The American middle class blossomed. Life was more predictable. Your savings felt safe. The rules of the game were clear because money had an anchor. But by the late 1960s, that anchor was starting to drag. The United States was spending money at a dizzying pace. The Vietnam War was costing billions. Ambitious social programs at home, the Great Society, added even more to the national bill. The government wasn't raising enough in taxes to pay for it all. So, it did what governments are always tempted to do. It started creating money out of thin air. The Federal Reserve began printing dollars to cover the nation's soaring expenses. And here's where the trouble started. The number of dollars flooding the world was exploding, but the amount of gold in US vaults wasn't. Soon, there were far more dollar claims out there than there was gold to back them. Other countries weren't dumb. They could do the math. They saw the US printing money and knew their dollar holdings were being diluted. Led by a skeptical France, foreign governments started showing up, dollars in hand, and politely asking for their gold. And America had to give it to them. Gold started pouring out of Fort Knox. The American gold stockpile was hemorrhaging. By the summer of 1971, President Richard Nixon was trapped. The US was on the verge of defaulting on its promise. It had written way more checks than its gold account could cash. He faced a stark choice. Either impose brutal austerity, end the war, slash spending, and throw the US into a nasty recession, or just change the rules of the game. On the weekend of August 13th, 1971, Nixon gathered his top economic advisors for a secret meeting at Camp David. The public knew nothing. America's allies were kept in the dark. There, they made a decision that would change modern history. On Sunday night, August 15th, 1971, Richard Nixon went on national television. He talked about creating jobs and fighting inflation. He blamed international money speculators for attacking the dollar. And then he delivered the lie. It was no longer a claim on gold. It was a claim based on trust in the politicians who now had unlimited power to create it. Temporarily. That was the word that mattered. A temporary fix to calm the markets. He also announced a 90-day freeze on wages and prices. But the real bombshell was the gold window. He didn't just close it for the weekend. He slammed it shut, and it has never reopened. That temporary suspension is now over 50 years old. In that moment, the Bretton Woods system died. The dollar, and with it all global money, was unchained from gold. The the anchor was gone. So, what happens when money isn't tied to a real-world asset? The government's printing press can run wild. And that's exactly what happened. The promise of discipline was gone. If a government wants to fund a war or massive new programs, it can just print the money. The only limit is political will, not a physical commodity. As a result, government deficits, which had been relatively small for years, exploded. The 1970s became a decade of economic misery known as stagflation, a toxic mix of a stagnant economy and runaway inflation. Prices for everything, from gas to groceries, soared. Your paycheck might have gotten bigger, but it bought you less and less. This was a silent theft of your purchasing power. This brings us to this great decoupling. For decades leading up to 1971, when the American worker got more productive, their pay went up right alongside it. It was a fair deal. But after 1971, that link shattered. A gap opened up between productivity and pay, and it has since become a chasm. Worker productivity has kept climbing, but the pay for the typical worker has stagnated. Now, incomes did still grow. According to Pew Research, the median income of a middle-class household grew by about 60% between 1970 and 2022. But over that same period, the income for upper-income households jumped by 78%. The result is that the middle class holds a shockingly smaller piece of the pie. In 1970, the American middle class took home 62% of the country's total income. By 2022, that share had collapsed to just 43%. Meanwhile, the share of income flowing to the top has ballooned from 29% to 48%. The wealth didn't just vanish, it was redistributed upwards, fueled by a money system that rewards debt and asset speculation more than it rewards hard work and saving. The temporary suspension of gold convertibility was the single most important economic event of the last century. It was a default on a promise to the entire world, and it fundamentally changed the deal between you and your money. Money used to be a way to store your time and energy, a hard asset. Today, it's a tool of political policy that can be created without limit, quietly devaluing your labor and your savings. The consequences of that Sunday night decision aren't just in history books. They are a huge part of why your rent is so high, why it often takes two incomes to get what one used to, and why you might have that nagging feeling that the system is rigged against you. The lie wasn't just that the suspension would be temporary. The real lie was that this new system would be better. For 5 decades, we've been living in that experiment, an experiment that has concentrated wealth, fueled debt, and hollowed out the middle class. Understanding this isn't just about being angry at the past. It's the first step to demanding a system that rewards work, not just proximity to the money printer. If this history shocked you, and you want to understand what it all means for our future, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. In our next video, we'll dive into what this broken system means for you today and the new technologies emerging to challenge it. Thanks for watching.